I'm Priscilla Barrera with the Investing News Network, and here with me today is Trevor Raymond, Director of Research at the World Platinum Investment Council. Trevor, thank you so much for joining us again.
It's a pleasure to be here, Priscilla. Thank you.
All right, so we're here at Sprott. We're in Vancouver. We're entering the second half of 2019. When looking at the platinum sector, what would you say has been a main trend in the space?
I think the biggest thing, Priscilla, thank you, is that in the first 3 months of this year, we saw significant buying in platinum ETFs. So the platinum ETFs increased by nearly 700,000 ounces. And we think the institutional buying of those is probably recognizing the demand growth drivers that we're seeing in the next little while. So I think there's some issues around, there's pretty likely to be more diesel cars on the road, probably likely to see platinum going into gasoline engines, and I think the fuel cell vehicle has been recognized. So those are the main trends, and I think you've seen our estimates last year of a surplus come down from 600,000 to 375. Johnson Matthey that reported in May, they've got a deficit this year. So I think things are changing quite a lot.
All right, and one of the things that we saw changes here is the price. Prices have increased at least 10% so far in 2019. Is that a trend you expect will continue for the rest of the year?
So I think we've come out of a slump for platinum. I think platinum's been negative sentiment and a declining price now for about 7 years, certainly since we've been doing this. And what changed is that platinum had been tracking gold very closely. And in the first quarter, we saw that when the buying of the institutional buying of ETFs, we saw the platinum price rise $80 and gold stayed flat. So I think part of that is that the recognition that something's happening has been reflected in the price. It's tracking gold again, so it's still a good diversifier. But certainly, I think the main reason is that the market looks a lot tighter.
All right, and in terms of demand, we also have seen demand increase compared to last year. What is driving that demand?
So mainly the increased demand was investment demand, but what we've had is that the market, I think, is assuming that the percentage of diesel cars on the road in Europe, which has fallen from 50 to about 30, some people are assuming that's going to 25 or even down as low as 10. It's turned around slightly, the rate of decline is a lot slower, and we've seen a rise of diesel car sales in Germany. So if that settles at 33 or 34 rather than 25, each 4% is an extra 100,000 ounces of demand. So I think that's been the main interesting bit. In terms of growth elsewhere, industrial is a very strong growth segment. It's grown more than global growth for the last 10 years. I think that'll continue.
Right, so for the rest of 2019, are we going to see demand continue to increase, remain flat?
So we think definitely institutional demand is likely to remain stronger, and I think we should see some, in the second half, something coming back from diesel, certainly, and maybe a bit of good news on substitution. I think the investors that took the position in the first quarter certainly were taking a long-term position. They're well-informed investors. They've been in the space before. We haven't seen them buying in this manner for 5 years. So I think they're more looking at the demand growth over the next 2 years rather than in the second half. So you might not see it come through in the second half, but certainly some of the indicators of why it's going to be there in the next 24 months, that's what you'll see come through.
Right, and you're talking about diesel cars a lot. Are we seeing more demand for platinum instead of palladium because of the surge in price in palladium? Is that substitution, is it happening right now, or is that yet to come?
Okay, so obviously, the reason that you've got diesel in platinum in a diesel car is it's a low temperature environment, and sulfur tends to affect both platinum and palladium a little. In a gasoline engine, the high temperature can burn off the sulfur. So pretty much all gasoline cars are palladium and all diesel cars are platinum. So this increased diesel sales is good for platinum. In terms of the concerns about palladium, you will have seen that this is the 8th consecutive deficit for palladium. The palladium price went from a few $100s to over $1,600. And I think it's the availability. If you look at the palladium market, it's remained in backwardation for a very long time, which suggests that both the sponge and the ingot are in short supply. So we think automakers really concerned about availability of palladium are going to be putting platinum in at a 1-to-1 ratio. The Johnson Matthey report in May said that only about a third of cars in China will be affected by China's 6 legislation this year, and that would increase demand by 500,000 ounces a year of palladium. So this is really material. So we certainly believe that substitution is happening. We don't have evidence of it yet. It's obviously proprietary and confidential. The automakers aren't talking about it, but we certainly think it's a material amount for platinum. And if you only were to get 5% of the global cars substituting platinum for palladium, that would be 400,000 ounces a year of demand, which doesn't do much to the million ounce deficit for palladium, but it certainly is very material for platinum.
That's true. So, and when you're working on your forecast in terms of demand and even looking ahead, further ahead, do you include things like new technologies that could impact the demand of platinum? I'm thinking maybe hydrogen fuel cells. Is that something you consider will happen?
Yeah, okay, so our data unfortunately only looks out 12 months. We do include platinum fuel cells, and we think what's changed in terms of sentiment is that people are recognizing that because the penetration and sales of battery vehicles hasn't grown much at all, it's quite disappointing in terms of what was expected, and the high amount of investment that's gone in, that there will be battery vehicles in the future mix as well as fuel cell. Now, fuel cell cars are probably 8 years away for material volumes, but fuel cell trucks certainly high volume. So we think you just can't make a battery truck, but you can make a fuel cell truck. So we think ports and city bus fleets is where your hydrogen will be available for heavy duty, and that might bring another 100,000 ounces within the 3 years. That's interesting, but certainly that recognition has come into the short term.
Right, so a lot of factors that could impact demand, but when we look at supply, what are some of the concerns in terms of platinum supply going forward?
So I think the margins of the South African producers have been really tight for some time. There's been a huge turnaround recently because of a bit of rand weakness, and also the palladium and rhodium prices are particularly high. It's still very difficult to grow South African output, which is still dominated by underground mining. There are a few new projects around, but very small volumes. So I think flat would be a great achievement for supply, but certainly growth doesn't look possible. So the potential of flat supply and demand growth, that's what we think is the market is finding quite interesting at the moment.
All right, Trevor, my last question for you today, for the investors that are watching us, why would you say platinum is a good investment in the current state of the market?
Sure. So as you know, we're not regulated. We don't give investment advice, and certainly we don't forecast price. However, I think the disconnect, what you've seen is very informed investors taking a strong position earlier this year, and that hasn't been reflected in the price. So what we're hoping is that retail investors that look at our material, that look at Johnson Matthey, can see that the informed money has already been invested and the price hasn't responded. That's usually quite appealing to a retail investor.
Right. Okay, Trevor, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Priscilla. It's been a pleasure.
Once again, I'm Priscilla Barrera with the Investing News Network, and here with me today is Trevor Raymond, Director of Research of the World Investment Platinum Council.